There can be no whitewash at the White House.
Morning, Mr. Mitchell.
How are you?
Were you aware at the time that the White House was running its own Pentagon Papers investigation?
No, I was not.
Isn't that a bit unusual that they wouldn't cut the Attorney General in on something like
Apparently not, because it would involve the Justice Department activities.
John Mitchell, the man in charge of President Nixon's re-election, said, "There's no place in the electoral process for this type of activity."
Was it usual practice to run investigations from the White House without cutting in the Justice Department?
The Justice Department had its own investigative agencies, and I don't know what was being done at the White House. Obviously, we did know about this, or the case would have been thrown out.
Machine fabric softener to cling free.
It's everything better than Watergate and it's so convenient. Just spray it 5 seconds in your dryer.
First was G. Gordon Liddy, a key member of the White House plumbers team.
And each large
E. Howard Hunt has already told the grand jury that he acted as a burglar, as a forger, on the White House staff in connection with an investigation into the Pentagon Papers. He has been convicted as a Watergate conspirator. Today he was granted immunity from prosecution in connection with his forthcoming testimony before the Senate Watergate Committee. He believes that he may end up reciting his lurid story in an open session.
I served him as chief advisor on domestic security.
Did you become aware of it?
I don't know whether they would or not. They didn't.
Was it usual practice to run investigations from the White House without cutting in the Justice Department?
The Justice Department had its own investigative agencies, and I don't know what was being done at the White House. Obviously, we did know about this, or the case would have been thrown out.
In some other grand jury testimony released at that Pentagon Papers trial the other day, Watergate conspirator E. Howard Hunt disclosed that in 1971 he gained access to confidential State Department files. Today, the State Department had something to say about that matter. ABC diplomatic correspondent Ted Koppel reports.
Far from having any quarrel with Hunt's testimony, State Department spokesman Charles Bray today confirmed it and then added a few details of his own. Not only was Hunt authorized to go rummaging through classified cable traffic, he made copies of 240 cables and took those copies with him. Hunt was assisted in his labors by employees of the State Department's Records Services Division, but Hunt never told them specifically what he was looking for or why. How did Hunt gain such easy access to the inner sanctum of the State Department? Apparently, a phone call was enough to do the job. The phone call was placed by David Young, who worked at the White House on the Domestic Council under John Ehrlichman. Young placed one call and the State Department doors opened wide to E. Howard Hunt. At the time, David Young was conducting a study of security procedures within the government, but there is no evidence that this is what caused the State Department to cooperate so freely. As Department spokesman Charles Bray put it, when a White House staffer in good standing asks for assistance, we tend to respond. This is Ted Koppel, ABC News, Washington.
When the president stepped before reporters late today, the Watergate scandal became a whole new ball game.
I condemn any attempts to cover up in this case, no matter who is involved.
Was not to be arrested in the CIA then. Was acted on a request by John Ehrlichman. Ehrlichman is under investigation because he resigned from the White House, and he was asked today about General Kareem.
The whole thing's up and out there now, and we'll open it all up to be closed, and that the FBI is convinced it's the CIA that's doing this, and Gray's looking for a way out of the investigation.
We're following consistent policy here in the front yard and not getting into questions of that kind. I wouldn't have any comment on any question, that one or any other that gets into any of the facts of these. We would not want to deny that. I wouldn't want to give a comment one way or the other.
Advised that the CIA may have been involved in the Watergate burglary of the Democrats, and that he told H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman, then his senior aides, to ensure that the investigation did not expose, as he put it, an unrelated covert operation of the CIA or the activities of a special White House investigations unit. CIA memoranda made public in the last few days indicate that Haldeman did seek to have the CIA limit the Watergate investigation being carried out by the FBI. Richard Valeriani is at the White House, and he has details on what the president said about this aspect of the story.
To them, and here I quote, to ensure that the Watergate investigation of the break-in not expose either an unrelated covert operation of the Central Intelligence Agency or the activities of a special White House investigations unit, unquote.
But had ordered that a cover be kept generally on CIA investigation of...
Mr. Dean has conducted a complete investigation of all leads. I can say categorically that his investigation indicates that no one on the White House staff, no one in this administration presently employed was involved in this very bizarre incident.
To it, warning the agency of efforts to blame it for the Watergate affair. The letters were written between last July, a month after the break-in, and this past January. One was signed Jim, leading some congressional sources to think they may have been written by James McCord.
The office was a CIA job, pressured, he said, by his own attorney, Gerald Ulsh.
I heard him out on the suggestion, which included questions as to whether I could ostensibly have been recalled from retirement from CIA to participate in the operation. He said that if so, my personnel records at CIA could be doctored to reflect such a recall. He stated that Schlesinger, the new director of CIA, whose appointment had just been announced, quote, could be subpoenaed and would go along with it, unquote. I told Ulsh that I could not use as my defense the story that the operation had been a CIA operation because it was not true. By now, I was completely convinced that the White House was behind the idea in the ploy which had been presented, and that the White House was turning ruthless, in my opinion, and would do whatever was politically expedient at any one particular point in time to accomplish its own ends.
Accusations of the Watergate Pentagon papers, all involved in the White House, located in Rotterdam. The top of the regional elders of the family reported after a president because the Nixon to flood security leak. The Lebanon Prime Minister declared the state of emergency as violence flares began in and around Beirut. Howard?
The tapes tonight from Tom Jarrell on the White House statement about the president and Watergate, Dick Shoemaker on the latest revelations in the Ellsberg trial.
Bill Mitchell, the man in charge of President Nixon's re-election, said there's no place in the electoral process for this type of activity. Presidential Press Secretary Ron Ziegler called it a third-rate burglary attempt and said it was nothing the president would ever be.
The Testament says it was not until March that he learned of attempts within the administration to cover up its involvement in the Watergate case. Today, Newsweek magazine has a story that contradicts the president's account. The magazine says that Mr. Nixon's former legal counsel, John Dean, is ready to testify that the president called him into the Oval Office last September, 2 days after the Watergate burglars were indicted, and congratulated him on keeping the lid on and preventing any White House aides from being caught up in the indictment. In a sharp departure from its no-comment policy on Watergate, the Florida White House today issued a carefully worded denial of the story. ABC's Tom Jarrell reports. The Washington Post won the Pulitzer Prize today for its stories on the Watergate scandal. That's not surprising news. The Post did better work on that story than any other institution in American journalism. The Post did it in the face of a torrent of abuse from the White House. The White House apologized last week, and this week the Post deserved it.
Starts to work as you drink it instead of your...
Meanwhile, the White House addressed itself to another Watergate mystery today. A statement by the president 2 months after the break-in that no one in his administration was involved in what he called this very bizarre incident. ABC White House correspondent Tom Jarrell reports.
When the president confidently told the nation last August there was no White House involvement in Watergate, he drew the conclusion without ever having talked directly with his own chief investigator, John Dean.
Word is out in Washington that new indictments of White House aides in the Watergate bugging case are imminent.
ABC News learns that President Nixon has given his personal attorney, John Dean, who has been linked to Watergate by rumor, an implied vote of confidence.
90-minute give-and-take session today with newsmen. Ziegler directly refuted claims by Dean that he never even conducted a Watergate investigation. The press secretary contends that he often discussed the investigation with Dean on the telephone to obtain information on how to respond to news questions. Ziegler's claim is that Dean investigated, told his findings to senior aides like Bob Haldeman and John Ehrlichman. They in turn informed the president. The 3 men involved, Dean, Ehrlichman, and Haldeman, resigned April 30th.
Last Watergate today, AFL-CIO President George Meany said he wasn't sure whether Mr. Nixon could govern effectively following the Watergate disclosures. More on the story from Herb Kaplow.
In one of the most difficult decisions of my presidency, I accepted the resignations of two of my closest associates in the White House, Bob Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, two of the finest public servants it has been my privilege to know.
Allowed for the president.
Which has national security.
Senator Barry Goldwater had some stern words today on the impact of the Watergate scandal. In a statement issued in Washington, Goldwater said, "We are witnessing a loss of confidence in America's ability to govern," and he urged President Nixon to start making moves in the direction of leadership.
Clemency. To the best of my knowledge, he said, "Jack, I want you to go back to him, McCord, and tell him that we are checking on these wiretaps, but this time impress upon him as fully as you can that this offer of executive clemency is a sincere offer which comes from the very highest levels of the White House." I said, "I have not used anybody's name with him. Do you want me to?" He said, "No, I don't want you to do that, but tell him that this message comes from the very highest levels." I said, "Do you want me to tell him it comes from the president?" He said words to the effect, "No, don't do that. Say it comes from way at the top."
With what I saw happening to the FBI under Pat Gray, political control by the White House, it appeared then that the two government agencies, which should be able to prepare their reports and to conduct their business with complete integrity and honesty in the national interest, were no longer going to be able to do so. That the nation was in serious trouble has since been confirmed, in my opinion, by what happened in the case of Gray's leadership at the FBI. E. Howard Hunt has additional information relevant to the above. Hunt stated to me on more than one occasion in the latter part of 1972 that he, Hunt, had information in his possession which, quote, would be sufficient to impeach the president.
Senate confirmation as Attorney General.
The decision to appoint a special prosecutor probably holds the march toward new indictments for the time being. The present prosecutors are unlikely to make the crucial decisions on who is to be charged and for what until the outside independent supervisor Richardson has in mind is able to give his approval. This is a particularly tough time for the prosecutors, with all the potential defendants scurrying for the best possible position. The Senate Watergate Committee has asked for limited immunity for 6 potential witnesses, including Jeb Magruder. Tomorrow, the committee takes up the question of how to get the president's former counsel, John Dean, to cooperate. He's angling for complete immunity, or failing that, simple misdemeanor charges, so he won't lose his license to practice law. There have already been delays in getting Dean's and Magruder's story because of uncertainty as to what legal price to pay for it. And some of those decisions can't be made free of suspicion until the special prosecutor is on board. Carl Stern, NBC News, at the federal courthouse in Washington.
Or in other words, the 7 pages of Hunt's testimony made public the administration President John Kennedy ordered the assassination of South Vietnamese President Diem. Hunt, a member of the special unit also investigating Ellsberg, told the grand jury he went to the White House and used a Xerox machine, a razor blade, and a typewriter to change the State Department cables. Hunt said he was ordered by Colson to show the fake cables to a reporter from Life magazine. All of this information, revealed today in one way or another, relates to the trial of the Pentagon Papers. If it's found that any evidence against Ellsberg used in court was obtained illegally, then the charges against him could be dropped. Dick Shoemaker, ABC News, in Los Angeles. Congressional investigation was started today into reports that the Central Intelligence Agency provided aid in the burglary of Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist. The New York Times reported that the CIA provided material and research for the break-in, and that Marine Corps Commandant Robert Cushman, who was elected director of the CIA at that time, authorized the assistance. Senator John
is saying the president tried twice for reasons of national security to suppress details.
Think the president should not resign, although his popularity and credibility have declined.
American people do not think the president should resign as a result of the Watergate scandal. But 54% of those polled said they feel the president's credibility has declined so much it will be hard for him to be an effective president again.
The President today sent Congress a special message on his plan for a bipartisan commission to recommend post-Watergate election reforms. Although the message did not refer specifically to Watergate, the President cited widespread abuses during the 1972 campaign. Meanwhile, the White House addressed itself to another Watergate mystery today. A statement by the President 2 months after the break-in that no one in his administration was involved in what he called this very bizarre incident. ABC White House correspondent Tom Darrow reports.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Dan Fler with David Brinkley's Journal.
Aide testifies he relayed an offer of executive clemency to James McCord on orders from John Dean, then White House counsel.
And some things he didn't do about the Watergate burglary and the attempt to cover it up.
Conceded today that he should have been more alert to the warning signals he received about a Watergate cover-up than to the reassurances of his staff. In the President's words, "I should have been more vigilant." He commented in statements issued by the White House, and Dan Rather has the details.
Advised that the CIA may have been involved in the Watergate burglary of the Democrats, and that he told H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman, then his senior aides, to ensure that the investigation did not expose, as he put it, an unrelated covert operation of the CIA or the activities of a special White House investigations unit. CIA memoranda made public in the last few days indicate that Haldeman did seek to have the CIA limit the Watergate investigation being carried out by the FBI. The hearings constitute one of the most important investigations in Watergate, and it's expected that the list of witnesses will be long and colorful. Carl Stern has more on the story.
The senators reviewed the evidence and then decided to open hearings a week from Thursday. The committee leadership declined to speculate where the trail would lead them.
Well, so far, I have no information that the President was personally involved in this matter. And I don't like to answer if questions. As I've stated before, we down in North Carolina, we sing an old hymn that says one step enough for me, and I just take one step at a time, and I don't take any steps at all into fields that you have to rely on a lot of hypotheses, unproved, and ifs.
The men that don't want to would ever run for real. So no future
stigmatize any person unjustly. On the other hand, I think we've got a committee that will try to find out the full and the truth of the foul matter.
You will not have the power.
Chip falls out of the mic.
Well, that is no.
Right down to the last chip. All the way.
CIA. You will not have the power.
Chip falls out of the mic.
Well, that is no.
Right down to the last chip. All the way.
CIA.
God bless America. And God bless each and every one of you.